So welcome everybody to our first Startup Today live stream podcast. My name is Matt. I'm sales manager for TechOn. If you don't know who TechOn is, we do basically recruiting top tier remote talent from our team in Nepal, working with startups, especially in the kind of phases that we're talking about today, anywhere ideally from seed up to scale up phase as well. Myself, Matt, I'm the host. I have a background of working with startups from Japan, Perth, where Lee currently resides, and now I'm in Sydney, building the TechOn brand over there. I have a background in product management, also marketing and communications. So, but today's not about me or TechOn. Today is about Lee. So pleasure to have you on our first debut episode, Lee. And Lee's not a stranger to us. We've been working with Lee probably for, about a year and a bit, I would say. Yeah.
Oh, a
Or
little
a little bit
longer,
less.
maybe no,
Yeah,
perhaps
yeah,
for a decade.
yeah. So, and I think you have a pretty good relationship with Patrick too, who's the other guy on the other side of the Australia. But yeah, so thank you very much for coming today. Maybe let's get a quick intro about who you are first before we dig too deep into the topic.
Yeah, sure. So thanks very much first for having me on that. I've been looking forward to this for a couple of weeks now. It's been good fun. Um, cool. Me, 22 years in tech. For my sins, 5 years in banking, finance, enterprise. After that, I bumped into startup land. Since then, I have been CTO or CPO at four different startups and scale-ups. And for the last 2 years, I am a fractional CTO, primarily helping the portfolio companies of venture capital firms get high growth numbers out of their software product investments. I typically work with around about 10 VC-backed companies, startup companies between seed and Series A stage, and a little bit of Series B. Me?
Awesome. And I think that's a good segue into what we're talking today, which is basically looking at the CTO role from seed to Series A, kind of how to grow, maybe out of seed and into Series A as a CTO, and looking at how to scale tech, how to scale teams, and how to scale themselves as well as CTOs. So this will go about 45, 50 minutes, and we should have some time at the end for questions. If we go a little bit over, that's okay. We've probably got about 10 minutes or so there, but that is how it will run today. So if anyone on chat, anyone watching today, feel free to ask questions as we go. We'll get to that towards the end of the session. So you mentioned you were a fractional CTO and obviously working in tech advisory now. So when would someone typically engage someone like you, and why? How do you work with startups?
Yeah. So any kind of fractional executive, be it a CTO or a chief revenue officer or a chief marketing officer, they add value at early stage companies when they're a little too early to want to justify spending a large six-figure number on someone who's done it 3 or 5 times before, but would value the strategic advice. If you were building a house, um, think of your fractional executive as the builder, not the person who lays the bricks or does the roof carpentry. They're the one that helps you with what you need to know about how you coordinate and manage the tradies and what the different challenges are at the different parts of the journey.
Cool. I think maybe from my experience, I've just seen fractional as like valuable across the whole entire startup journey, to be honest. Like, especially I think you bring, lots of valuable insights, especially from your time as a startup founder, CPO, CTO, from the very, very beginning all the way up. So I've seen you, obviously give back some of your time to earlier stage founders, but obviously, where we're talking is probably where you love to play or where you ideally play as well. Would I be right
Yeah,
in saying that?
absolutely. So um, when you're, and we'll talk a little bit about the stages because we've used some terms like seed and Series A, and I'll use some other
Yes.
terms like ideation and pre-seed, and we'll get into that in a moment. But if you haven't yet built an MVP, you only want an executive or a CTO with those external facing executive skills for a few hours just to point you in the right direction. But most of your money should go on build, get that MVP in market, and get some feedback from real customers, preferably ones that are paying you some money. Um, Once you get a little bit further on the journey and you find product market fit, i.e., a repeatable model to get people to pay you money for your software products, that's about the time where you might get a fractional executive in any of the disciplines, including technology, in for a few hours or up to a few days a week. And
Yep.
once you're a bit further on that journey and you are now scaling on the team to teams transition, so you have 8 or 10 or 12 in your company and you're moving to 20, 25 in the next year or two, that's when you should probably find the forever executive in that discipline. Hire a forever CTO rather than keep a consultant like me around is the right part of the
Yes.
journey. So this is why I specialize in seed and Series A, with a little bit of coaching for Series B onwards style CTOs.
And I've seen you definitely help people fill that forever CTO role, but maybe we'll touch on that a little bit later. Um, so what's one lesser thing that maybe people don't know about you? And I know you're a pretty open book, but
uh, um, I really liked applying my own version of Marie Kondo to my life. Keep only things that bring you joy. I'm a chess, poker, and StarCraft nerd in roughly equal proportions, but my consulting company is called Zero Tool Consulting, which is my favorite in StarCraft because every time I see my company name, it's something that brings me joy.
oh, that's good. So if anyone's looking to connect with Lee on something a little bit more than startups, you've got a bit of an intro or segue right there. Okay, so let's talk. Why do you think, especially this transition from seed, and we'll talk about, maybe we'll give some context around seed as well, seed to Series A. Why is this such a critical transition and critical phase?
Right. So this, I think what I might do is a little bit of quick definition of terms for some people
Yep.
that might not be as familiar with the inside baseball startup lingo of
Sounds good.
that we all use to reflect when a venture capital firm wants to invest in your prospective high growth company. We use roughly four key phases. Ideation, and that's the founders trying to validate the problem and whether or not the problem exists enough for there to be a financial opportunity from it. Then we have pre-seed, which is again just the founders and maybe a subcontractor or two trying to build that minimum viable product and get first revenues in the door. Once you've got first revenues, you now have a candidate for seed round funding, and that's the founders building a team around them with the money they've raised, and they're trying to find product market fit. We can talk a bit more about these phrases like problem opportunity fit and product market fit a bit later on if we
Sure.
have time. And then Series A, which is the transition that you asked a question about, is the teams, that team expanding into multiple teams, which means now you're building more of an organizational communication structure and hierarchy where the founder doesn't speak to everybody in the company every day. But now that we have product market fit, we're turning the flywheel for if we put $1 in, we get $2 out, and we know how to do that. Now we just need to spin that flywheel as fast as possible and grow the team. So that's coming out of product market fit from seed into multiple teams to do a really rapid job of turning that flywheel to capture market share and grow during Series A. And that's called finding marketing sales fit.
Hmm.
There's a great article on this called The Phases of Fit by Judd Morgenstern. We'll provide the links afterwards
Yep. Sounds
so
good.
that people can hit that one up. But I strongly recommend you get into it. Cool. So the question was, what's the biggest difference in seed versus Series A for CTOs? So the successful CTOs that help their company succeed more on this stage of the journey rather than just do the tech work are the ones that not only understand the systems related work, and that's all about CI/CD, application architecture, test automation, security, hosting and infrastructure, all that good stuff. Sure, that's the price of entry for a senior engineer or an engineering manager.
Mhm.
The successful ones, they need to understand the customer, the problem that we're solving for the customer. What's the unique thing that we do that other people that try and solve this problem for the customer in the market do? So what's our unique selling proposition from that separates us from our competition? And then You have to build amazing relationships with every function within the business to be able to learn, understand, and stay atop this. And I guess the main takeaway here is notice how none of that is systems engineering related work. And this is a really big transition. It's more of a career change than a skills development activity. And I think the successful ones, as evidence from the ones that are continuing to grow at Series B onwards that I work with, are the ones that take this transition, this career transition seriously and lean into learning the next stage of their journey.
So, this is really like a fundamental shift for people like in that senior, whether it's like the technical co-founder role or they're like equivalent founding engineer or a technical co-lead, and just kind of scaling, not only kind of growing out of their older shoes, for example, but also much more, much more delegation, I would say, but much more communication, much more collaboration, and obviously, I think more leadership as you build out or scale out your team as well. Would that be right?
Yeah, although even that is probably a pre-seed to seed stage journey. I'd want to see a
Hmm.
lot of that kind of focus happening when you're moving from founders and some contractors into your first team, because
Right.
now you need to be able to communicate and articulate your what needs to happen rather than the person that does all the doing. For the seed to Series A journey, we have these concepts of core skills, which are our systems, our people, and our delivery. And then
Hmm.
we have this new category called our executive skills or outward
Right.
facing from your engineering function. And it's the transition to more of these exec skills and exec responsibilities that I think is probably a starting point from C to Series A. And
When you start to wear the executive hat a little bit more, or yep. And maybe just give people a little bit of an idea of, executive level, because I think, there's a lot of fractional CTOs that I see out there, but some of them I would say don't have that C-suite ex experience. So when you're starting to put on the executive hat, what is happening then to that, CTO, let's say?
I really like this question. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. What I do when helping these seed and Series A stage companies find their forever CTO when we're hiring, the types of skills that they're looking for is either someone who has what I'm about to describe or someone who is enthusiastic about growing into what I'm about
Mm,
to describe. So, executive skills are different from your core skills of systems and people and delivery because your core skills are inward facing to your product engineering function, whereas your executive skills tend to be more outward facing. This is a simplification, it's not always the case. But for executive skills, first up, strategy. Now, this is a word that has been overused into near oblivion, but let me try and put a slightly sharper point on it. Aligning your technology strategy, so what you do with systems and people and delivery, to the business strategy. What does business strategy mean? Right. In plain English, business strategy is the 2 to 4 paragraphs of qualitative description of how we're going to allocate our resources over the next 3 to 12 months, maybe the next 3 to 18 months inside the company. So that's what we pay for in staff, what we pay for in contractors and third-party services and tools, in posting, in lawyers, in sales team, in marketing. The big picture view about what's the theme that we're going to align all of these resources in one direction on. That's what they mean by strategy. So when I say aligning tech and business strategy, I mean, how can we quantitatively understand the measures of success inside those fluffy high level descriptions of what we're going to get done over the next 3 to 18 months, and then align all of our engineering spend, not only the systems and services that we license, but the people that we hire and what type of roles and in what order
mm.
to that commercial strategy. Typically, what you want to do there is break it down into some quant measures of value. Cool. How many new customers are we expecting to have? How many free trials do we need to put through the system to get there?
Right.
How much does the sales and marketing team need to generate in leads and prospects to be able to get that many free trials into the ecosystem to succeed there? These are the types of things that now you need to understand more deeply to be able to align the resources that you have in your engineering team strategy. Next, after strategy, it's risk and compliance. So
Oh, fun stuff.
mostly risk and compliance, we think, okay, cool, there's going to be some online learning that we need to do, or maybe there's an ISO certification that we need to get. I think the best way to reframe this is probably more, what are the risks of things that will block us scaling?
Mm.
Because I talked about this Series A stage being cool, we found product market fit, so now we're building the team so that we can grow, grow, grow. What are the things that you can look 3, 6, 9, 12 months ahead and say, it's not definitely going to happen, but I'd like to reduce the chances of this thing happening that could get in the
Yeah.
way of us achieving this kind of growth. So scale blockers. And sometimes it'll be an ISO certification like 27001 that allows the sales team to sell to a certain type of customer. That
Like
journey, no matter
government,
what the
I
consultancies
guess.
tell you,
Mm.
takes 6 to 9 months. So you can't start it 3 weeks before your first government customer. And this is what
Yeah.
I'm talking about for a
Yeah.
CTO. Understand the business, speak to the marketing team, speak to the sales team, and have a look for the scale blockers. That's your risk and compliance obligations. Next, it's financial management and budgeting. This is a 12-month use of funds. If you're planning on raising a Series A round of funding, that might be $5 million, that might be $10 million. They're going to want to see how your company is proposing to spend that money.
Yeah.
What's the team design? What's the role design within those teams? What order are you bringing those people on? Why are you bringing them on in that order? Do you need that many people? Could we instead hire one or two fewer and spend that money on sales or marketing? We're in a
Mm.
growth mode. So giving the money to go to market and doing our engineering later is the kind of thing that you responsibly engaging with financial management budget is typified by. And lastly, it's that whole stakeholder management and influence. Have lunch with the CFO, have lunch with the chief revenue officer, get to know them as humans, find out what they do on weekends. Are they into tennis or pickleball or marathon running or, I don't know, PUBG if they're a video gamer or World of Warcraft? I don't mind, but building relationships and understanding means that when you come and ask for them to back you on a play, they understand you and your motivations a little more as a person. And you having spent time hanging out with them for lunch will actually mean that you're more successful in your role in intangible ways that you wouldn't otherwise know. So stakeholder management and influence is the last of these outward facing or executive skills that don't directly connect to product engineering.
Yeah, awesome. I want to take a step back because I think I want to like explore from your experience or from what you've seen, what kind of qualities or because you talked about curiosity being like a core quality for someone who'd make a better, let's say, CTO if they're a senior dev or a tech lead. What are some of the other skills or qualities, soft skills that you see that tend to turn in people into better CTOs down the track? When you look, when you're looking to help someone hire a CTO role, for example.
Cool.
Just quickly, if we can just
Just
cover
quickly,
that.
tough question. I think at the core, curiosity and empathy are the two key factors that I'm looking for. I quite like um, curiosity because it shows that the person has the desire or interest in engaging with and staying up to date with this really fast moving industry that we live in. And you need to kind of want to learn about it every day, every week. You don't have that innate curiosity about the
Mm.
discipline that we're in. And I don't think you can succeed at staying abreast. Second, empathy. I think there's a really nice Mark Andreessen quote from Andreessen Horowitz, the very successful US VC, quote here, which is culture eats strategy for breakfast. Your
Nice.
your team is what will build your product. It's not your visionary ideals or your unique engineering capabilities. It's your team. It's about the team, Stu. And that means I really want to see you or the successful candidate for somebody who's CTO track to be strong on wanting to make all the people around them happy, succeed, and grow. And we can come back to that grow part a little bit later on hiring.
Sure. Okay, awesome. So sorry, I got a bit off track, but it was just getting extra curious about that. So we've talked about kind of what the exec skills, the outward facing core skills are. So then if the person who's moving into that CTO role, what should they stop doing? And then as a result, what should they start to do more of, do you think, as they
Yeah, cool.
transition?
This is a really fun one. First, and the really easy one is stop allocating more than about 5% of your time. Yeah, that's 2 hours a week, folks, to individual contributor tasks. What we need you to do is focus on activities that have high leverage. So if it's you squashing an individual bug, that has a leverage of one. One of your other engineers could have done that, even if it took them a little bit longer.
Yeah.
If you, on the other hand, were to improve the developer experience that spanned your entire team, now that you have 2 or 3 product engineering teams in this Series A journey, that means you could have had a leverage of 12 or 15 for that 1 hour that you spent. So individual contributor tasks have definitionally the word individual in them. So uh, pay close attention to if it's something that um, you know you can do faster and it would take you longer to explain it to a member of your team than it would for you to just do it yourself. That's a trap, an Admiral Akbar style trap. Um, and every time you find yourself doing a low leverage or low multiplier activity that doesn't spread benefit across everybody in a team or your division or one of the other divisions like sales or customer support, then have a good hard look at how it is you can reallocate that by doing the hard work of spending some time training somebody else in that skill set.
Yeah.
Cool. Next, you need to stop spending more than about 20% of your time on systems. Now that you're at Series A, you have at least one, probably 2 trusted tech leads or an engineering manager or a head of engineering that can also help you with this. What you're mostly looking for from them is the 3-in-1. These are the 3 ways we can do it, and I recommend this one. But you absolutely don't want to be spending more than 20% of your time on that inward facing skill of systems. You have much higher multiplier things that you can be doing with the rest of your time. Sure, participate in solution design sessions. Sure, participate in sticky application architecture things that come up during retro at the end of your sprint. That's all good. 20% of your time is a daily, but keep a cap on it a day. We all know that we got here because that's the fun bit, but don't let the fun bit get in the way of the high multiplier bit.
Right. So it sounds a bit to me like learning to delegate more, empowering like the devs in your team a little bit more, getting them, and even if it involves maybe you spending more time training them, that's you reducing the key dependency on yourself as well in some ways, because you're then empowering the team to take over tasks that you no longer really need to spend time on. Would that be
Yeah,
right?
so there's a really strong pattern that I like here. I can't remember where it originally came from, so I'm absolutely stealing this quote from somebody else.
That's fine.
But
Yep.
the pattern here is you should be never doing any one thing more than 3 times, because by the third time that you've done it, you want to have successfully trained somebody else how to do it and then trained yourself out of that particular part of your job. So, what this means in practice is if it's something that only you can do, that should be something that you identify up front and then try and articulate the process that you go on, capture it with some light documentation, or
Mm.
at the end of that activity, just turn on record on your phone, drop it in a note, and speak the things that you did for 5 minutes, any form of write up on what it is that you've done. And then the second time you do it, bring along someone who can give you a hand, show them what you've done, show them your first pass documentation, give them a task of writing up the second version of the documentation from your early scratch notes. And then the third time, get them to do it and you review it. And all of a sudden, by default, there is now somebody in this organization, in your organization, that has at least as good a grasp of this activity, hopefully a better grasp because they wrote the version 3 of the documentation. And we all know any process or documentation sucks before
Okay,
that.
awesome. Yep,
Yeah, train yourself out of a job every time,
yep.
every responsibility. You should be doing the things that only you can do. And if only you can do it, that is also indicative of it being something that you should now document up so that somebody else can do it. Happy and high performing teams are one where you delegate autonomy and control downwards in your organizational structure. And that means you get to use their whole brain. The last bit that I'll talk to here is communicating in why we're doing something rather than communicating what we're doing, or even worse, communicating how we should do something. When you communicate in whys, which is either a problem that you're solving or a benefit that you're trying to get, two sides of the same coin, then you empower your team beneath you to use their full brain to come up with potential better whats and hows than you might have come up with. And this is the foundation of pushing autonomy and control downwards.
And then becoming real problem solvers as well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to kind of tech stack maturity and product scaling. And I think that was a key thing that we wanted to cover. But as a CTO, how do you balance, cleaning up the tech debt that starts to build up versus maintaining momentum with the product?
Yeah, cool. So there's a handful of different things here. So first up, I think just about every software engineer on their journey has had trouble articulating the value of cleaning up the technical debt to the leadership team. And that doesn't change when you become CTO. You're not magically the boss of all your resources are allocated. You're just another
Yep.
person in the room. So that means we need to first communicate the value. So on that, swap the framing. Think about the measures of value that the people you're trying to persuade are looking to optimize for. If you say, I would like to clean up tech debt, your CEO and your CRO look at that request and they go, well, I've got features that I'd like you to build and they generate new customers. So I'll take the features, thanks, and we won't touch the tech debt. We've all had this conversation. But if you flip the framing around to, I want the engineering team to go faster so that you get more units of features built per sprint, per developer than you used to, and you can articulate some form of payback time with some back of the envelope numbers, all of a sudden you're talking a language they understand. I want to build more features faster. All you're doing now is you're describing the difference between building features, which is cutting wood, and cleaning up the tech that holds back us building features quickly, which is
Right.
sharpening the axe. Eventually, the axe will get dull, and everybody understands that there's no point in trying to cut wood with a dull axe. You sometimes need to put an edge back on that thing so that you can move fast. So the communication is about understanding the measures of value your stakeholders are optimizing for, and then proposing that we sharpen the axe just a little bit. How much sharpening of the axe should we be doing? Right. I reckon if you're doing zero sharpening of the axe, you had better be in pre-seed or seed stage. We don't sharpen the axe while we're building an MVP, and we only do a little bit, maybe 5% of our time sharpening the axe at seed stage. Mostly, we just want to keep iterating until we find product market fit. Now that you transition to Series A stage, I want to see at a minimum 10% of product engineering time in any given sprint spent sharpening the axe, and in an ideal world, up to 15%.
Yep.
If you're doing more than 15%, I have another word for you, and it's just as bad as doing 5%. It's called gold plating, and it will lose you trust and respect from the rest of your leadership team, and your propositions will be treated as boy cried wolf. So, yeah, 10 to 15% for a Series A stage company is typically what I'm looking for a healthy zone for how much sharpening the axe we do around cleaning up tech debt. Next, there's a foundational concept here about whether we should be sharpening the axe now. And
Yep.
the concept here is we do our engineering at the last responsible moment. That is, sure, the word responsible does all the heavy lifting in here. And it takes a fair bit of experience and a fair bit of judgment to be able to get that right. That's okay. That will come over time. If you're only 3 years into your journey, don't stress. This will be a lot more apparent after the 5 or 10 year mark. But responsible in Series A means what's the minimum amount that we need to do to get to our goals for this period of time that came out of strategy with the rest of the leadership team, so that the rest of the resources that we have, mostly budget for hiring people, can be allocated to the go-to-market for the things, your sales team and your marketing team. Now, I know it feels really counterintuitive that you asked me about tech debt, and what I'm talking about is giving up engineers so that we can hire more marketers and salespeople. But Series A stage, we're capitalizing on product market fit. We're trying to spin that flywheel as fast as possible. There will be future stages where we are more about dealing with the problem of scale. But we're probably not really struggling with the product scaling and the tech debt right now. Sure, is it slowing us down? Yeah, but is it the most responsible way for us to use our resources? That's a good conversation to have. Let's go deeply into that. Chat about it with the relationships. And it's easy to chat about it because you built good relationships with the CFO and the chief marketing officer and the chief revenue officer, right?
Over lunch. Over lunch. That's right.
Absolutely.
So I know we weren't going to answer questions interactively, but Kale's raised an interesting question just on that topic. He said, when should you start a code base from scratch rather than addressing the tech debt? Any things to look out for? Any gotchas, he says, to look out for?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, there's kind of three rules in this order for when we should do a ground up rewrite. It's never. After that, it's also never. And after that, it's still never. So we want to deliver value in the smallest possible or the soonest possible increments. Time to value is what I care about here for complete rewrites. Notice how time to value for a complete rewrite at seed or Series A stage is probably going to be measured in months, maybe quarters. This is way too long for the allocation of these resources to be delivering value to an organization that is being measured basically weekly on its growth at the absolute smallest granularity monthly.
Right.
So I am really not a fan of any kind of rebuild or ground up rewrite. As soon as I hear rewrite or rebuild, it's a 5 alarm fire for me to then go investigate how it is. We've gotten to
Yep.
the point where we're using these words. We can achieve the same outcomes of a rebuild most of the time. And it was hyperbole before. It's not never. It's practically never. Most of the time we can achieve the value that we're looking for once we articulate the value in increments where we gradually evolve the existing piece. Now, Kale, that's a great question, and that was answered in the context of the title of this session, which is Seed to Series A. If, on the other hand, we're coming out of ideation and we have some slapped together prototype that was done in a vibe coding tool, and we're now moving into seed
Uh-oh.
stage,
Yep.
I am completely open to a ground up rewrite.
Yep.
Yeah, but in the context of seed to Series A, we're not doing ground up rewrites in Series A. We're just not. Check out the story of how Netscape Navigator lost to Chrome, and you'll see a fascinating deep dive into the pitfalls, dangers, and threats to your strategy of doing a ground up rewrite when your your competitors are delivering incremental value on a regular basis.
Yeah, awesome. We're probably another link to share if we can find that case study. Let's move on to hiring and team building, scaling your dev team essentially. So as you're transitioning out of seed into Series A, what's the approach that you recommend or that you take when you're trying to hire the first few key people after you've secured funding?
Cool. So again, just to briefly recap, seed, um, you've built a team around a founder and you're exiting seed and you're transitioning into Series A because the inflection point happened of we found product market fit and now we raised money to go from team to teams off the back
Hmm.
of convincing an investor that we had found product market fit. So there are a couple of key things that are changing here. We're no longer going to be able to expect fully converged communication. What I mean by that is every team member knows every other team member exactly what they're working on and their relative strengths and weaknesses and their skill set and their work history. Now, all of a sudden, we need to hire engineers for both of the streams, management stream and engineering stream. Cool. Why do we have management and engineering streams? If you've ever been a senior engineer that just loves the experience of building solution, being close to the tech, and not wanting to turn up at all of the sprint planning sessions, all of the strategy sessions, you don't want to do one-on-ones, then that means you're an engineering stream person. If we say that the only way, though, as a senior engineer, you can get a pay rise is to move into a people management role, then this is a disaster. You don't want to do it, but you will want the pay rise, so you'll take it. And then you'll do a terrible job being a people manager. And that, your culture eats strategy for breakfast. Your culture will eat itself in that circumstance. So we separate engineering and management streams so that we have career paths for everybody in the organization. Next, now that we're hiring people for management stream, previously just about everything has been engineering stream that we've been focusing on at seed stage. And everybody knows everybody and what they're working on. Just about everybody knows the entire application stack and ecosystem. Now we're separating that out. So we try to hire from within. A growing startup is one that is typically a rising tide that lifts all boats. This means if you're a senior engineer in a company that has a CTO, five senior engineers, and a QA,
Yeah.
UX and D. Now we're going to split into three teams. How many of those senior engineers are going to put their hand up for tech lead or engineering manager?
Yeah, right.
Most. Cool. There's a career change when you step into engineering manager from senior engineer, which is quite different to moving from senior engineer into tech lead. This is because now more of your time is about people and delivery than it is for the first time in your career about engineering or systems. And this means we need to start looking for um, engineers that will, or potential hires, potential candidates that are interested in learning and developing the skills around one-on-ones and professional development plans and all that other good stuff that sounds abhorrent to fully 70% of this industry. Um, and hiring for that, or if you're lifting somebody up from senior engineer into those, coaching, mentoring, and upskilling those people into that role um, is what I really want to see a lot of energy go into. The reason why I say I want to see a lot of energy go into this is because there's a really great Gartner study. It had a look at, I think it was 16,000 knowledge workers in the tech space, and it asked them, what's the main reason that you left your role? 18% of them uh, uh, left their last role because they didn't earn enough. 21% said they left their last role because they didn't like their boss. And 40% of them said, I left my last role because I didn't feel like I was learning or growing in my role. And that means the single strongest way to build a happy team that loves what they're doing and feels reward and satisfaction in their role is to have management stream people, people leaders who pay attention to the learning, growth, and career path of every single person in your team. And that's the single strongest thing to get, the single most important thing, and the single strongest thing that you can do to fairly easily get right if you hire the right people that value spending time on that team building. Um,
Yeah. Because I would imagine, like even you're scaling your team at Series A, retention is a really big, is a key kind of factor you should be considering. Because even if you lose one person, that's still a major loss to your team, I would say, even in that Series A
yeah.
stage.
There's another concept that fits in here to this outward facing communication, where unlike a lot of other disciplines, customer support, sales, marketing, you can find fairly transferable skills that land and get up to speed fairly quickly. A
Mm.
better example for what looks like engineers is having a lawyer land where if they've only ever done family law, they're not going to be able to spin up in commercial law quickly. This takes time.
Yeah.
It's the same for a software engineer. It takes, depending upon the seniority of the role that you hire, but let's just say a typical mid-level engineer, the mainstay of your team, takes them about 3 months before not just are they comfortably shipping features with a minimum of drag or questions or effort from other people in the company. Sure, it'd take them 18 months to get to peak performance, but it's not just that 3 months before they get to a certain level of usefulness. It's the drag on the other team leads, the tech leads, the senior engineers that they have to talk to that have to dedicate time, which means when you turn somebody over, you don't only have the IP that they already had that
Yeah.
walks out the door of their 12, 18, or 36 months of work experience inside your company. You also have the opportunity cost of all the people in your organization that need to put energy into first hiring them and then skilling them into the organization after they've been hired.
Yeah.
So the opportunity cost is easily 3 months, probably more like 6 months of that role in your company's ability to deliver on its 12 or 15-month goals at Series A.
Right.
It's a disaster if you turn over people during Series A. And this is why we hire for empathic people leaders.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Let's move on, just for time's sake. Communication, I think, is a big one, and you've touched on it already a little bit. But what do you see as some common shortfalls between? I want to explore both actually. I want to sort of like CTOs and non-tech founders, but also developers and non-tech founders.
Yeah. So, at the leadership, you know what? It's funny. You separated those two, but I absolutely wouldn't. I think
Right.
the behaviors of effective communication is something that, with technical or non-technical people, is something
Hmm.
that even the graduate engineer on day two in the office can do with whoever it is they meet, irrespective of seniority in the lunchroom or around the water cooler. Um, so what I'm about to share with you is something that should happen at all levels of people on engineering career journeys. And you don't need permission. It doesn't matter what level of seniority you are. The answer is most people will say hi back if you say hi. Most people
Yeah.
will answer what they did on the weekend if you ask them. Most people will reply that, yeah, they do like chai if you observe that they don't typically drink coffee in the morning. I mean,
Right.
communication is something available to all of us at all levels. So, communicating with non technical founders and new investors. Let's park the investors one for a bit because that's an entire topic unto itself, but communicating with non-tech founders. I think non-tech founders, product people, or anybody outside of the engineering discipline, what I really like is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe answer. Apply number 42. It's the answer to life, the universe, and everything. You give four sizes in increments of two whenever somebody asks you how big or how hard something is or to do something new. So you say, here's what I can get done in 2 hours, in 2 days, in 2 weeks, in 2 months. And that's four examples in increments of 2 hour blocks. And then you broker a great quality conversation with whoever that stakeholder is about whether or not that 2 hour version or that 2 day version gives them enough value from the problem that they would like to solve,
Sure.
rather than investing in the 2 week or the 2 month version. So really, I never want to hear communication with people outside of engineering, including the words no. I want to hear, or we're too busy, or we can't do it. I always want to hear, hey, here are some options. Let's sit down together and figure out if any of these options feel like they're higher priority than the things that we currently have prioritized.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really value that. So 42, that's our trick. Next, notice how that answer was connected to the measures of value that they're optimizing for.
Mm.
When we talked earlier about the changing roles that CTOs have when they move from seed to Series A, we talked about strategy and we talked about breaking strategy into unique measures of value. The reason why it's so important is so that you have the scaffolding of these measures of value to have good quality conversations with people across the business and inside your team.
Yeah.
And also to give your team members the scaffolding to have good quality conversations about, should we do this now? Is the type of value that it gets us the type of value that we're optimizing for right now? So communications is inextricably linked to metrics, because metrics is derived from your strategy. And at Series A, we're all about growth. So I want to see us optimizing for the measures of growth that are in our next 12 to 15 months for us to get escape velocity for the next stage of our scaling journey.
Yeah. Awesome.
I can now connect that back to the other part of the question, which was about communicating with investors. The investors are going to be laser focused on those measures of value, specifically those growth-based measures of value. Revenue is downstream of a lot of the other measures of value. Revenue comes when the other numbers hit the appropriate levels for revenue to be there. We don't target revenue specifically inside engineering, but understanding what dials we need to turn that are upstream of revenue that results in those revenue goals is, for me, the strongest way for anybody in a product engineering role to communicate with the senior leadership team inside the company, and then the board, which is comprised of your investors.
And I should add, Lee knows what he's talking about because he's been on the other side, kind of helping investors do the DD on startups, especially around metrics, I should say. So you've been there, done that. You know, I would say you definitely know what you're talking about in that realm. Because
They're
you've
only
worked in that
interested in the
space.
numbers. They're interested in every venture capital firm is there to get a high yield on growth. So
Yeah.
understanding these metrics or measures of value will be the strong concrete slab on which to build your story, skyscraper, whenever you're.
Yeah. The other thing I liked about what you said initially, just around kind of the communication shortfalls, like just remembering that everyone's a person. You can say hi, you can talk about your weekend, you can talk about, what did you do for Easter? You can talk about, what are you doing for the coming long weekend, next weekend? Simple things like that, just to help break down barriers or walls to start that open lines of communication. Just remembering people are people. It's less about the role, or the position or the hierarchy. Yeah, I really like that, what you said too. So that's one way to just start breaking that, or should I say, bridging that gap, I think.
And if you want to read a little bit more about bridging that gap for communication, and also the hidden side benefit of this type of communication, which is called networking for later in your career, relationships that you build as a junior, mid, or senior engineer by talking to people across other parts of the business. It means that turns into your professional networks for later stages of life when you're looking at moving into senior engineering manager, engineering director, CTO style roles yourself. So not only is it powerful inside your current role, it's powerful in the long run of your career. There's one person who writes really articulately on this, and that's John Cricket, Crickett.
Ah,
He has some fantastic stuff on
yes, yes.
communication, networking, empathy, and the direct connection of those three things to success in career paths for software and product engineering.
Awesome. Yeah, he just added me on LinkedIn this morning. So I should feel
You're in
it's
the big
funny.
leagues now.
Yeah, apparently. Although I looked at his followers, he's got like 184,000 followers. Anyway, yeah, I digress. What I might do is I might set up the Q&A session. So if you've got any burning questions that have come up, feel free to type them in chat as we move on to governance, risk, and compliance. And then we can address them, and then we can talk more about, some of the reflections that you've had, throughout this time, Lee.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah, feel free to queue those questions up in the chat if you've got some burning questions. Hopefully you do. We've already had a great one from Kale, while we cover the next topic, which is the fun stuff um, around governance, risk, and compliance. So, what is your advice for first-time founders, especially moving into this, from the, as we talk about, seed to Series A phase, from team to teams, um, around, navigating all those kind of fun and joyful rides of the business scene, should I
Yeah,
say?
absolutely. So, again, I'll just recap what the current state looks like when you're in seed and transitioning so that we can talk about what the mindset needs to be into Series A. So, in seed, when you're thinking about security and compliance and audits, I touched on it briefly earlier. We're doing what's called the sales enablement version of security, compliance, and risk management. Um, that is the absolute leanest thing that we can do, measured in minutes if possible, hours if not, and
Yeah.
days if absolutely required, but nothing more than that, to make sure that the sales and the marketing teams are A, telling the truth when they say we've had a penetration test, um, but B, have enough resources to then go and talk about it because we didn't consume it all with big, rigorous engagements with an ISO 27001 security journey or a SOC 2 security compliance journey. So we only do these things to the extent at seed stage that it's absolutely required in order to get our customers in the door. Once you're getting to Series A, now rather than just conceiving of these activities on a sales enablement minimum threshold, now we need to talk about actually doing it properly. The difference for a B2B SaaS startup doing a penetration test so that we can tell our prospective customers that we get annual audits from a penetration test. Um, the cheapest version will come in at kind of $5,000. Now,
Mm.
this is not what a single security professional in the industry will tell you is a useful, large enough, broad enough, or deep enough penetration test to actually
Right,
secure your product. But the
right.
goal isn't about securing the product. It's about meeting the minimum thresholds at seed stage to achieve the growth that's necessary to get the funding to transition into Series A stage and then do these things properly.
I
That
see.
means a pen test done properly at Series A stage might cost you somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000. And then it might cost you between 2 weeks and 2 months of developer effort to then apply all the recommended changes to get to an actually secure product. So, seed stage, we care about making sure that we don't have a scale blocker. Series A stage, we now care about actually mitigating some of the risks.
Right.
And compliance is typically a vehicle that we use to demonstrate in a standards-based manner that we are doing a sensible job of mitigating those risks. Whereas security, now at Series A stage, I would like us to have all of the engineers do, at a minimum, OWASP training. It's not that hard. At a minimum, us to build an active security facet into our PR reviews process. And I want us to have some basic practices around who is it that gets notifications when there is a critical vulnerability that's discovered in one of the pieces of software or tools in our tech stack. We
Yeah.
now need to be on top of this because we're a much bigger target at Series A than we used to be at the seed stage. Seed, we could fly under the radar. Series A, people have heard about us. We have enough
Right.
customers that we will get targeted, and now it becomes important.
Yeah. And I will say, if people are seriously exploring their options around pen tests or even ISO or SOC 2 compliance obligations to apply for the certification, we do have a pretty good partner, third-party independent partner in Nepal as well that we work with to arrange that. So they're a little bit more cost effective than some of your local options. So yeah, beyond our software devs and AI engineers and project managers, we do have access to cybersecurity pen tests and compliance, let's say, help for those applications as well. Bit of a self
Nice plug. I
plug
like it.
there. We do have a question. Was there anything else you wanted to cover there before I?
Plenty.
Yep, cool. We do have a question, first question from Drew. He's asking for a startup in ideation with the goal of going through pre-seed to seed, etc. How and when does TechOn get involved, and subsequently, how does Lee get involved and work alongside TechOn? So maybe I'll just take a step back with that. I think it's more that what we tend to do is depends who meets the founder first. When we work with a founder in the ideation phase, we can typically help with a very, let's say, high-level prototype to build out your Figma prototype, clickable prototype in Figma. And then when you're, getting feedback on that particular prototype, at the same time, we would then probably look to refer you to a person like Lee, if not Lee, to then talk about, what should the roadmap look like. And what we do is we just facilitate the introduction. We don't get involved in any of the advice. We just want someone that, has been through those kind of innings before, who has the experience to be able to give you objective advice around, where to start. So Lee, we've worked together on a few different startups in the past. Do you want to add to that? Because I think, for example, if someone engages you before they talk to me, for example, how would you see that?
Yeah, okay. So, Drew, thanks for the question. And in the specific context that you've asked it, which is pre-seed to seed. So
Yep.
pre-seed being where building or about to build or have just finished building our MVP, and now we're chasing first revenues to be able to have an investor say, cool, we believe that you will be able to find product market fit with this block of seed round money that we're going to give you. In that context, you really want to avoid having somebody like me chewing up, or somebody with my skill set chewing up too much of your budget. I want to see you get that MVP in market as thinly, as leanly, as cheaply as possible so that you can do some real validation conversations with real ideal customer market segments and ask them the questions about, do you have this problem? Does the solution solve that problem? Are you willing to pay for this solution that solves that problem of yours? How much are you willing to pay? How about pay right now? Until you get yes to that last one, how about you pay right now for the thing that we've built? Spend as little money as possible on people that give highfalutin, high-level strategic advice like me. Spend that money on mid and senior level engineers to smash your MVP into market. Once you have people that have started paying you money, the advice that they give you about what they would value in the next type of feature that you build is 5 or 10 times more valuable than the feedback or advice that you get from people who haven't paid you money about what you should build next. So I do get involved and work alongside TechOn, but my engagement at the pre-seed to seed stage should be somewhere between 1 to 4 hours.
And so maybe I'll just add to that, depending on whatever the resourcing looks like, Lee may say work with TechOn, and then we can help resource the developers for that lean MVP build, depending on where you're at, what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to build as well. But I think the prototype is always like probably the cheapest way you can go about getting feedback from something visual, something people can use in that kind of very, very early ideation phase. And that's probably, I reckon that's a really good way to spend money if you can't do it yourself.
Absolutely. And 18 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to say what I'm about to say now. But this is a fast-moving space when you're talking about ideation and pre-seed. So ideation stage, you're building a proof of concept which faces your team. Can I build conceptually, does the technology exist to build the thing that I would like? Once the answer to that is yes, then we should be able to do that on hundreds or thousands of dollars at most. Then we want to make it external facing, your prototype. This is not yet the thing that someone will pay you $1 for, but it is a thing that you can use in validation conversations. Again, I want to see this done in 2 or 3 digits, maybe 4 digits of spend. Once you, and you can do that these days using vibe coding. Do I love it for something that has an actual dollar of revenue going through it? No, it is not secure. It is not something that you can easily modify. It is brittle. It is everything that you don't want in a production application. But on lovable.dev or Replit or Vercel v0, you can smash this together for $20, maybe even on the free plan. And then once you've had those conversations with people that say, oh yeah, that solution's interesting, but I want it to do X, Y, and Z, now you can take that to a company like TechOn, who will give you devs, and you have a much better idea of what the brief for your MVP is. Cool.
Yep. And I will say, like, also, I've seen people even create manual workarounds for their MVP and their prototype without any tech from day one. So obviously, depending on how complex your build is, there's tools out there, AI tools out there that you can build pretty simple prototypes. What lovable.dev's pretty good. I've seen, you can create a simple website in about an hour. So things like that are
Um,
also out there.
to loop back around to Kale's great question from earlier, when you vibe code your prototype, that's when it's okay for the rebuild at MVP.
Yep. Awesome. Let's move on. Sam from G Propel, he's asking, what are the basic things a startup needs to have in place to qualify for seed funding in an investor's eyes? Any tips, please?
Great question. This is quite a large question, but I'll see what I can do in a couple minutes. I think the way to really get at the core of what qualifying for seed funding looks like as the end state is, are you as a founding team the type of people that are ready to go on the not 2 year, not 3 year, not 5 year, but the 7 to 10 year journey that is building an a 9-figure revenue and a 10-figure valuation software product company? Anyone that tells you you can get there in 3 years or 5 years, they're dreaming. So the investors are looking at, are you the type of person that is committed enough, has a life stage that is suitable for, and care enough about the problem to stay the course when the going gets tough over the really long term? Because unless the initial founder is there, the chances of you hitting that unicorn status and qualifying for VC funding is basically zero. Next, they're looking for traction. So after team, it's traction. Has somebody paid you $1? If the answer is no, the answer is probably no. So do the cheapest possible MVP build that you can do, but don't do that MVP build unless you've taken the ideation stage seriously. Speak to people who you hypothesize have the problem. And if they agree that they have the problem, speak to them about your proposed solution. If they agree that they like your proposed solution, cool, go vibe code a prototype, put that in front of them, get their feedback. Take these stages really seriously. Don't just go build an MVP based on gut feel. Build it and they will not come is more of a truism than build it and they will come. Right. Once you've got that early traction, then the last thing that they're looking for is your growth plan. Is it realistic? And is it based on a market that's big enough for a VC to back? If you have a growth plan that will take your company from $20,000 of revenue so far in its lifetime to $2 million of revenue in 12 months, and you'll definitely get there, that sounds really good. But if your market size isn't big enough for it to go to 10 million and then 25 million and then 100 million of revenue over the following 5 to 7 years, they're still not going to back you. So have a look at TAM, SAM, SOM, which is your market sizing techniques, and you'll find that on every single pitch deck market sizing page. So they want to see traction and they want to see opportunity for you to continue to grow, and then they want to see that you have enough of an understanding of your market to be able to succeed in that go-to-market strategy. Notice how none of these things are engineering things?
Yes. Well, I think it's, the pivotal point that we're talking about where, funding is kind of key leverage to move into that, obviously that Series A phase. So, no
Yeah,
doubt that's why these questions come
get that
through.
MVP
But
done for 4 figures of total spend at most if you can. Like worst case scenario, 5. Try and keep it. If you're planning an MVP that's 6 figures, you'd better be in biotech, you'd better be working with children, or you'd better be in fintech or government. Unless it's in those categories, there is no justification for a 6-figure MVP. It should be small.
awesome. Love it. Any other questions from the audience? You still have some time. Um, While we're waiting, maybe we'll go on to the next section, Lee, which is, this sounds like a coaching question. If you could give your past CTO self one bit of advice before raising Series A, what would it be?
One bit of advice. Why can I only pick one?
Well, it doesn't have to be one,
No,
but
no,
let's say
that's
top
cool.
top three even. Yeah.
Um, it's going to be your investment in the team and your people. Hiring is the thing that you never feel like you have time to do properly, which means you don't invest your time in it and you don't invest external resources from professionals in helping you get those people, but getting the right people in your team so that you can then succeed at building the culture where every member of your team looks left and right for somebody that they can lift up with their skill set, help succeed, help grow, help flourish. Lean into that part. It's, in my experience, the single strongest predictor of the highest performing teams that I've ever seen. And you're going to need to have one of the highest performing teams you've ever heard of if you want to beat out the 10 competitors or the 100 competitors that are all trying to do the thing that you're doing.
Awesome. Um, you did have one thing about biggest lesson learned, but we did get one more question from Drew, which is what advice would you give a non-technical founder in relation to them trying to find or looking for a technical co-founder?
Right. Um, I really like that question because it doesn't assume that a skill set like mine is the optimal path to go. And that's right. Try find a tech co-founder. Give them a 2-digit number of equity, preferably starting that's between 20 and 50%, not 3 and 12%. Um, find somebody who's deeply invested in the problem that you're trying to solve, who also has the emotional intelligence to be a people leader and the technical work history to be able to deliver on solving the problem or building the solution that solves the problem. And that'll always be stronger than um, trying to build it without an equity incentivized technical co-founder. That's playing life on difficult incentivized technical. Or finding your equity incentivized technical co-founder. Start with communities and spaces with people that value the problem value solving the problem you're trying to solve as well. If you find a technical person out of those communities, then you already have a pretty based common foundation on which to build a relationship. Next, get somebody who knows what they're doing to meet, who has founded before or has been a tech leader before, to meet this person before you pull the trigger. If you haven't hired technical co-founders before, then get some advice from people that have hired technical co-founders before to make sure that you're making the right kind of decision. The enduring nature of your relationship just between the two of you is more like a marriage when you're finding you'll spend as much time with them as you do over the next 7 to 10 years if you're successful. as you do with your partner or your closest friends. So think about that. You're getting married to your tech co-founder, so make sure that you're um, in the in it for the long haul with a personality that you want to be in it for the long haul with. Is the other part. It's not just about software engineering. Lastly, there'll be the pillar, a pillar in your culture, because culture that's enduring comes top down, and the only way you get the highest performing teams is with psychological safety. There's a fantastic Google study on psychological safety. The highest performing teams, that's not, and you want to make
So
sure
many.
that when you're hiring your technical co-founder, you're absolutely hiring for someone that already deeply understands the role of empathy in creating high-performing teams.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that detailed answer. And Drew, we can probably share some resources too about potentially where you can look. It's a bit of a needle in a haystack kind of search, but there are resources out there where you can find potentially a technical co-founder. So either feel free to connect with me for that, or we'll link it on the video when we publish this properly as well. All right, just in the just conscious of time, let's maybe look to wrap up. So Lee, what do you want to do? Is it the biggest lessons learned that you want to share, or is it kind of key takeaways that we've discussed today that you think is more valuable?
Um, Probably key takeaways, I think.
Yep, let's do that.
And um, if anybody in the live stream chat wants to play back to us one or two of their key takeaways as well, then I'm more than happy to comment or buttress against any of those. So don't be shy if you spotted some takeaways from here. I think, in a nutshell, though, it's going to be understand the difference in what the company is trying to achieve at its new life cycle stage when it swaps from seed to Series A. Seed is about finding product market fit, and at the end of seed, you found, for some level of conviction, product market fit, and now you're transitioning to growth. This means now the focus changes from, hey, we're iterating quickly, to, hey, we're taking advantage. Even more so than at any of the prior stages, it's now critically important to make sure that engineering only consume enough resources necessary to facilitate that, and then push the rest of the resources back to the growth side functions, like sales and marketing. And that now we have teams rather than team. We're composing a culture with layers of management. It's a very different type of organization, and that means leadership doesn't spend as much time on product and on engineering as it used to. Leadership now has teams of people that spend time building product, designing product, and doing the engineering that builds it. Now we're focusing more on culture and the scale lockers, and taking seriously that evolution in the allocation of your time to align it to the growth goals of the organization.
Awesome. Love the sum up. Lee, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure if anyone out there who's watching this live or is watching the replay wants to connect with Lee, we'll provide all the links down in the details of the video so you can directly connect with Lee. If you're looking to hire a developer yourself, we have cost-effective resources out in Nepal, about a team of 60 currently, and we've been working with startups for 7 years, so always happy to have a chat, whether in person in Sydney, I'm in Japan next week, if you're around, or always online at any time as well. And yeah, I really want to thank Lee for being so generous with his time and his insights and sharing all his wonderful knowledge. You know, there's a lifetime there, 22 years in tech. So yeah, please join me in thanking him for his time as well. And yeah, feel free to connect with him. I'm sure he'll be more than
Don't be
happy
shy,
to say
folks. Hit
hi.
me up. You can
Yeah.
find me on leegold.com, or you can grab time with me on meets.leegold.com. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'll happily connect, and I do a little bit of writing on the topics that I've talked about today and similar startup high growth or product related topics. Would love to stay in touch. All right, Matt, thanks very much.
Sounds
This has
great.
been so much fun.
Yep, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys. Thanks for all the awesome questions. And we'll catch you in the next one where we're talking about no-code platforms and AI tools, especially accessible for non-technical founders. Thanks, guys. Catch you in the next one.